Hello, Stropes here again. So it's been about a month since I've done a Twin Suns deck tech, so I thought I would come back at you with another one. If you have not watched my Twin Suns builds before, I will walk you through budget list deck, basically, like all the bells and whistles, the best cards in each slot, and then walk you through subsequent changes to the deck down to about a $10 version of the deck, which is still playable, still, will work out very well, still keeps as many synergies as we can with that budget, and with the bonus that you could probably build that $10 version of the deck for free, especially if you're at a friendly LGS or you've got a friendly local play group who will help you acquire some of those cards. It would be pretty easy, especially in the case of this deck, if you've got a starter set from Shadows of the Galaxy, which the Mandalorian is one of those starter decks. Plenty of those cards are already in this list. We borrow from that. But with that out of the way, we will get into the deck tech portion of this video. So we are using Rey and the Mandalorian. So Rey's ability, she has an action. You spend one resource and exhaust her to give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. And the Mandalorian himself cares about upgrades. So you can exhaust him when you play an upgrade. That notably does not count Rey's experience tokens, so that does not work, but just upgrade cards. Then you can exhaust him to exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. So we are really trying to swing games by attrition, using Rey to buff smaller units, using the Mandalorian and other cards to kind of put shields on things, buff cards up higher than they would otherwise be, and then make advantageous trades once we've got shields, once we've got experience, and close out the game that way. Another thing worth noting, and kind of why I built this deck, is I pulled a hyperspace foil Mandalorian. Wherever I go, he goes. The Mandalorian is in blue-white, same as Rey herself, and he's looking for like a small unit, just like Grogu there, a unit that costs 2 or less, and then you can give 2 shield tokens to it. So again, he kind of synergizes with some of those smaller units that we may be putting upgrades on and then giving multiple shields to them. And then suiting up like a kind of a Voltron strategy if you are familiar with Magic the Gathering. So we'll go right into the math of this deck. There are 12 upgrade hits for the Mandalorian's leader ability. So the odds on that are 42.6% with the 2 cards drawn each turn, which means you've got about an 82% chance to have one in your starting hand. We are playing 12 is a fair amount. I kind of waffled back and forth whether we were going to go to 15 or things like that, but we've got a number of ways to pull them from the deck, whether that is with cards like This Is the Way, or even like bounty posting to pull something like a public enemy. One of the strongest plays and synergistic things that you can kind of do with the deck is to use cards like bounty posting to then pull out something like your public enemy, your wanted if you're trying to ramp, or maybe even an enticing reward if you're really trying to dig for some non-unit cards, and then tap down an opponent's card that would be could potentially steal that bounty from you. I think the Mandalorian, sometimes I don't play a lot of bounties in Twin Suns because it's easy for other people to kind of steal them. You don't want someone else getting the ramp that you just paid for. But the Mandalorian, I think, is an exception to that because of his ability to exhaust and then tap down something. So you can tap down the unit that would probably be taking the bounty from you and then claim the bounty yourself. So with that kind of like overall strategy, how we'll be playing the game, I will go into the card by card analysis here in a second. All right, we will start with the ground unit. So it is worth noting that 22 of our units, which is about half of our deck, have 2 or less power so that they can be buffed with Rey's leader ability. The odds of drawing one each turn with one of the 2 cards that you get at the end of the round are 69.1%, and to have in our starting hand, we have a 97.6%. Worth noting that all the math is over here that I will be quoting. I've put the card links on here too. This deck list will be linked in the description, so you can click on it, read through it if you prefer that kind of a thing. But all the math is over here, all laid out for you. This using a hypergeometric calculator is how I got all of these numbers, the draw numbers, which were pretty important in the last few deck techs that I've done, if you have been following along with those, especially because we were looking for keyword hits with like the Boba Leader, the Heroism Boba Leader. The math is a little less important for some of the stuff in this deck, because we're really just trying to swing the game through attrition and make value trades and things like that. It is not like essential, for instance, that we draw with Queel. When he triggers, we've got about a 20% chance to draw with him, but it is not like essential that we do so, especially because the deck synergizes in other ways. We have a lot of draw with cards like Grief Karga to pull items or upgrades. We've got stuff like This Is the Way to pull stuff too, and we even got have like a tutor, really cheap tutor, really, with like stuff like bounty posting. So the odds, we've got lots of draw, we've got lots of way to like peel things out of our deck, and some of these things are a little less important. So even if you see, well, 20% for a draw on Queel is not that great, it's fine. It's just there in case you want to know, just so you're not surprised when you're using his ability. You know the math yourself, and if you want to make changes to this deck, you want to make a copy, save it to your own deck, save it to your own decks and change it, then you'll know the odds that you're starting off with if you want to put in more red cards and increase your odds. So that is all just there for you to use. With that out of the way, we'll just go card by card through starting with the ground units. So we've got R2. R2 is constructed playable in Rey Red decks, just because he's got a pretty big body with that 4 health, and he also costs 1, so you can play him immediately and then right away use Rey's ability to turn him into a 2/5, right? Like first turn. So, and then makes it easier for his on attack because he can run into more stuff, sometimes trade with the unit, because Rey allows you to put that experience on a unit with 2 or less power, so you can turn him again, like once you get into round number 2, you can get him up to 3 power and then be hitting for quite a bit, trading for things, excuse me there, trading for things like Battlefield Marine. So also helps, talked a bit a second ago about the math and the draws. It really helps out with that because he lets you look at the top card of your deck and you can put it on the bottom if you would like. So he helps filter quite a bit, and combos with C-3PO there, because C-3PO, when he is played and on attack, you can choose a number and then look at the top card of your deck. If it is less, if cost is the same, not less than, is the same as the chosen number, you can reveal it and draw it. So R2 will help you like know what that is, and then C-3PO will help you draw it once you know. I already kind of talked about, maybe I can skip down here to the math though. We have 21 cards in our 50 card deck that cost 2. So if you do not know, you should probably guess 2 with C-3PO. Then you've got actually like around a 50% chance just to draw with him, and a 50% chance to draw even without R2 is fairly good. Similarly to R2, you can buff him with Rey up a little bit and he gets even better, but it takes some amount of actions. So Clan Ren Rescuer, why we've kind of split the deck a little bit between Jedi and Mandalorians is because there are not like a whole lot of Mandalorians that are completely playable to make a deck really well rounded and have them across all costs, and just to work out quite as well that way as we would maybe like at this moment in time. So we've kind of half and halved into a kind of force package to combo with these Mandalorians. Clan Ren Rescuer is pretty useful, I mean, even later in the game, because you can give his experience token to another unit. Rey can only buff people up with 2 or less power, so you can get someone up to 3, and then Clan Ren Rescuer can come in at the last minute and then give them a whole another experience, and you can then start to buff him or her with Rey. So pretty good card there, even to buff stuff up higher than we would otherwise be able to. Plus, Mandalorians care about having upgrades whether they are tokens or not, which is exemplified in the next card here, which is Follower of the Way. So while they are upgraded, they get +1/+1. So if you use Rey's ability on here, I used to love to do this in Sealed. In this set, when I was playing pre-release, you can immediately make them into they turn into a 3/5 there right away. So pretty good. And that's not counting anything else that you could put on them too. We've got Grief Karga coming up next. So when played, you search the top 5 cards of your deck for an upgrade, and then you can pull it. So he's got pretty good odds here because of our 12. Our 12 means that we are drawing with him. I think it is, where is he at over here? Okay, 76.3%. There he is. So not bad. Most of the time we will be drawing with him. And also he's a 2/2, so easy to buff with Rey should we need to, if we've got nothing else to do there. Grogu. Grogu is our first force hit. We've got a few cards in the deck that care about force hit, like the Force is with me, so Grogu is a cheap way to do that. Grogu also acts as kind of semi-removal in that you can use their Grogu's action ability to exhaust an enemy unit, but you can also equip Grogu with things like the Jedi lightsaber because it just cares if the attached unit is Force. They do not need to be a Jedi, so you can give that lightsaber to Grogu and Grogu can start swinging away. Also worth noting, you can use Rey on Grogu over multiple turns to be buffing Grogu up to like a 3/8 or something like that. Again, should you have the desire to do so. We have got another Force unit right here with Guardian of the Wills. So the first upgrade we play on it each turn costs 1 less. So this is a pretty good card for Voltron strategies. Used to see this in constructed Chirrut decks. But again, like a great target for stuff like a Jedi lightsaber, because then it only costs 2, but also a good target for a number of upgrades that would work across, because it doesn't really care, right? You could even entrench them for 1 if you're going to run into a big unit. Maybe you jetpack them for 1 because you want to give them a shield and then run into something, get a good trade. That kind of a thing is easily doable with Guardian of the Wills. Plus they hit our force trait that we are looking for. Housecast Soldier, just a playable Mandalorian, easily buffed, again straight up to a 3/4. They've got Saboteur, so can go around Sentinels, so they are potentially, especially later in the game, if someone has kind of turtled up, potentially a very good target for the Darksaber to stick on them and then hit the base with a really big hit, but not much else to say there. Ketsu is one of the only units, I think, at this cost range that we cannot buff with Rey because they've already got 3 health. They are a Saboteur though, and they are a Mandalorian, and they have the added bonus that when they deal combat damage to a base, you can defeat an upgrade. Worth noting that it says a base and a upgrade, so you could hit someone else and then defeat an upgrade from a completely different player, or even yourself, although I don't really know why you would do that necessarily. They don't really care as long as you've dealt damage to the base, but another potential good hit for the Darksaber. And they also get buffed, with the Darksaber, if the Darksaber is on Mando or something like that. We've got Queel here, kind of for thematic use, but also because they are a 2/3, so pretty easy again to just buff with Rey, turn them into a 3/4 with Restore 1 is really pretty good. Not much to sneeze at there. The on attack is to discard a card from your deck. I already talked a little bit about at the start of this section how the draw percent is only 20%, which seems pretty miserable, and honestly it is, but we do have stuff in our deck like the Razor Crest. When played, you can return an upgrade from your discard to your hand, so even if we accidentally discard the Darksaber or something like that with Queel, we can pull it back out with something like the Razor Crest, and it will be all right. Just keep that in mind when you're going through with that. Sabine Wren is our next card. Just a fantastic card, really competitive, constructed, great card. While there are 3 aspects among other friendly units, she cannot be attacked, which is a lot easier to do in Twin Suns because you have access, due to the nature of the format, to another base, which I guess you'd have anyway, but then like a whole nother leader pairing, so it makes it a fair bit easier to pull off her untargetable ability, or get that active. And then again, a good target again for Darksaber, because she at that point cannot be attacked. We've got Ezra Bridger here, so another good kind of low-cost unit. Hits Force, does have the Spectre tag. I almost considered a sub-theme with the Spectres, with cards like Chopper. They are like, that deck is almost possible, but we do not have a critical mass of cards to be able to do that yet, especially when compared to current Force units. Another bit of top deck manipulation, so even just in this ground section, we've got a number of ways to either draw cards, potentially with Queel, or like figure out what's on the top of our deck with 3PO and R2, and Ezra is just another way to do that. So when he completes an attack, you can look at the top card of your deck, play it, discard it, or leave it. So when he's out, you just got to be pretty mindful of your actions, how you're ordering them, because if you want to play off the top, you probably want to be attacking with him first to know what you're going to do with that. But again, he lets you discard it, so if you know that you're going to be dropping a Razor Crest next and you just want to plop it in there, and then draw it back out, you could do things like that. We've got a Night Owl Skirmisher here, so just another Mandalorian. The smuggle there is on 5, so not really great. Some of those common level smuggle cards are not particularly great on their smuggle cost, but I think smuggle is always, it's basically like draw. Another draw effect, even if it does cost a little bit more, and it does give you a little bit of versatility in that if you've already got another 3 cost thing, you can feel safe smuggling it, and you can always play it out later should you need to do so. And is another Mandalorian hit, and we do need a certain amount of them, a critical mass of them, for stuff like This Is the Way, and since we're running the Darksaber, we want to have a fair amount out to be able to hit with that. And they're a fine unit to use, not good, not bad, just fits the deck theme and is traits that we're kind of looking for. Protector of the Throne, another sealed and draft all-star in Shadows of the Galaxy. They are a 2/4. When they are upgraded, they become a Sentinel. So fantastic with Rey, because Rey can give them the experience, and then they get Sentinel right away and then turn into a 3/5 Sentinel. Plus they are a Mandalorian, so we love that trait. We've got Village Protectors here, another constructed playable card, especially into those aggro matchups. They are a shielded Sentinel unit, who we can turn into a 3/3 with Rey, plus thematic there, I think, from the Mandalorian episode as well. Next, we are now, because we're getting up into the stuff that costs over 3, the vast majority of these will be Force-traded units. Those Force-traded units are here for, like I said, things like the Force is with me and the Jedi Lightsaber, because if you can get a Jedi Lightsaber on a Rey or some other Force unit, it is pretty difficult to get rid of and pesky for your opponents. So the first one is the Jedi Master himself. We've got Yoda. So Yoda has not quite that much power in this manifestation of him, so he's only a 2/4, but again useful because we can buff him with Rey. He becomes a 3/5, and a 3/5 restore 2 is a pretty pesky unit. Also, when he's defeated, you can choose any number of players and they can each draw a card, something which is politically useful in Twin Suns, especially to have other people draw cards and make deals with them when he is defeated, maybe to skip a turn of attacking you or something like that. So worth noting on that front, a little bit different than in Constructed. We've got Kanan Jarrus next. So another card that you would see, we're kind of going through what would be a Han 2 blue list, but we've got Kanan here, another Spectre, another Force, so part of both a potential Force and Spectre package potentially, but he's got an on attack where you can discard from the defending player's deck for each friendly Spectre unit that you've got out. Note that if Sabine is out, you will be discarding multiple. just keep a track of that while you're playing. And then you heal a damage from your base for each different aspect among the discarded cards. So again, I think he's good anyway, and he's good in constructed, but I think again even better in Twin Suns, and especially the more specters you have out, because there are more aspect colors appearing in people's decks, so you can actually hit up to like about 4 sometimes, whereas the ratio is more around like 1 to 2 in a 1v1 player format. So I think sneakily good, especially if you're paying attention to how many they're discarding. You can sometimes hit quite a bit and heal quite a bit with Kanan comparatively. The next card is Rey. So we are running the Rey unit in here. She is a 4/7, so pretty tough, pretty hard to get rid of. Her ability, she's kind of unique in the sense of Rey and Kylo, who we'll see here in a second, their units can ignore the aspect penalty if they're in the deck of the other person. So just a kind of thematic way to represent the Force dyad from those films. And then on attack, she can heal 2 damage from a unit. That can be any unit, but if that unit is not heroism, you can give a shield token to it. So that counts both Kylo here, who is a villain, but it also counts things that you might not expect, things like House Cast Soldiers. They do not have heroism. Guardian of the Wills, they are not heroic either. Even Follower of the Way, not heroic, right? Because they're kind of neutral. So again, pay attention to that, because you can give shield tokens, especially to stuff like Follower of the Way, who really wants to be upgraded, and that upgrade will count for that. So great card there, putting out more upgrades and tokens onto our stuff, plus keeping our stuff shielded. A really fantastic card in the deck. The next card here is the Armorer. So they give a shield token to each of up to 3 Mandalorian units. So that can count our leader too. So a good thing to do could be potentially to deploy Mando themselves as the leader, and then immediately next come along with the Armorer, drop a shield on them. I think there is 85% chance when you count the amount of cards at the start of round 4 with 12, you'd have about an 85% chance to see 2 Mandalorian units, which is a fair amount. That is not counting the leader. And you've got about a 60% chance for the full 3. So not impossible, but also not necessarily likely. If you can just hit 2, really worth the salt, worth the hit there. The next card is Kylo, who we previewed a second ago when we were talking about Rey. So Kylo deploys on 6. He does not have an aspect penalty because we ignore his aspect penalty due to Rey being our leader. His on attack is he can give +2/+0 for this phase to a unit, and then if it's a non-villainy unit, you give an experience token to it. So just like I was kind of discussing with Rey, where she's looking for those non-heroism, and we actually have a few of those throughout our curve, even with stuff like Distant Patroller. With Kylo, he hits anything in our deck, so he can give an experience token to anything in our deck, which again pairs really well with Mandalorians, because Mandalorians are looking for those upgrades, and experience tokens count as those upgrades. So he can really start to snowball and buff up some of our stuff a lot higher than it would otherwise be, and works really well with Rey, our leader, who is also upgrading our stuff to give it those bonuses. So fantastic card there. Again, another force hit for those kinds of cards. The next card, we got up to 6. We are on Obi-Wan Kenobi, another force hit, a Sentinel, but when defeated, he gives 2 experience tokens to another friendly unit, and if it's a force card, you can then draw. So really, again, another fantastic kind of on-curve hit, because worst case scenario, he does give those experience tokens out to Mandalorians who are looking for it, but best case scenario, you give it to something like Kylo, and then you can draw a card too. So even if they get rid of him, you are drawing up and he replaces himself. So any cards that can replace themselves in the deck are pretty good cards. Next thing is the legendary Mando himself. When played, you can heal all damage from a unit that costs 2 or less, and then give 2 shields to it. So he is a Sentinel, a 5/6, so he's a pretty big body himself. Another way for us to try and clog up the board, stall a bit, maintain our health, because around 6 resources or so, sometimes the game is kind of wrapping up, and he can kind of stall out for a minute. And he also, because of all of the shields, he can kind of like shield up something. So you've got multiple routes to go with this. If you've been upgrading like a smaller unit, maybe you've been upgrading Sabine Wren, sticking a dark saber, things like that on her, you can protect her with these shields. Maybe it's a Guardian of the Will, so you've been slowly sticking stuff on, but he can kind of help that unit last a little bit longer. You do need to be quite mindful of cards like Takedown, or like cards that are often played in your local meta. Like if you're playing against a lot of red decks, I mean, the shields will help quite a bit because they'll just have stuff like Force Choke or Open Fire. But if they're on a lot of defeat cards, just be careful, because you do not want to have them fell the dragon you or something like that. So there's a little bit of a risk to going with the Voltron strategy and sticking literally everything on one single card. I would probably not do that if you're trying to be strategic about it. We probably want to spread out your upgrades a little bit, and then use the Mandalorian to kind of get that little bit of extra oomph when you're trying to either push through or maintain your board state in a certain way. But just be careful about sticking literally every single thing on one thing. That might not work out for you, so just be strategic, kind of spread it out a little bit. Top end and part of our, about like half, not half of the budget, but about like a third, I should say, of the budget or so, is Luke Skywalker. Just the best card, I think, to be running in this slot. One of the immediate budget switches is to just replace Luke with Windu. They're both Force, they're both Jedi, they hit the things we want to be hitting, but Luke, I think, is just a little bit better in this slot. But really, there's a case to be made for Windu anyway. But he's got Restore 3, he's a 6/7, and when played, you can give an enemy unit -3/-3. That would kill them, right? Potentially, if it drops their health to 0. But if a friendly unit was defeated this phase, you can give them -6/-6, which is another thing that we could be looking to do. It does say a friendly unit, so it must be one of yours. Some of your opponent's units sometimes, just worth noting that they don't count for that. So I've seen some people kind of misunderstand that. It's your unit, so you need to have one of your own units defeated to get that -6/-6. But great, fantastic card on the top end, and then it kind of like locks us in the game due to his Restore 3. If they can't deal with that, the game is kind of over because we can restore from that point. And worth noting too that we've got Restore a little bit across here, right? Like we've got Luke, we've got Rey just heals other units, but Kanan will heal sometimes quite a bit. Again, like in Twin Suns, we've got Yoda, we've got even stuff like Queel has Restore, and we've also got some once we get down to these space units and stuff like the Restored Arc. So there's a little bit of Restore theme here too, to be able to heal up a fair bit, especially if we can be buffing stuff like Yoda up to be like a 3/5 and then be restoring. They stick around and they become like quite sticky, stay around, and then heal up our base a fair bit, and takes a fair amount of removal or focused effort to get rid of them. But that makes it for the ground units. We will move on to the space units here in a moment. All right, we are going into the space units here next. First on our list is the Cartel Turncoat. So a 1-cost card that is a 2/3. We can immediately buff it with Rey, turn it into a 3/4 space card on 2. Pretty good. I love doing this. Again, one of the things I like doing in Sealed and Draft for the Shadows of the Galaxy. Just a really powerful play, especially if you're running Rey. Ran a Sealed deck where I had a few of these, and it's just really powerful. Worth noting that bounties, the bounty is draw a card. I've said this in multiple videos, probably going back to my first Grand Inquisitor and Krennic Twin Suns build, but I think bounties, especially depending on what they are a little offset set in Twin Suns because one person drawing one card is not nearly as powerful as it is in a 1v1 game when you've got a multiplayer format. So these bounties, I think, kind of don't matter most of the time. I'd say 9 times out of 10 they are not a big deal. The healing ones, though, I mean, you got to watch out for a little bit, but drawing a card is, we don't really care about that if one person draws one card. Next, we are going with the Alliance X-Wing, just a generic, one of those generic kind of blank cards. You see that really big white rectangle with nothing in the text box, but still useful in the sense that it is a 2/3 and we can buff it, turn it into a 3/4, which is just useful to have again in space, because space units, if you can stat them up a little bit, they can be quite powerful. Just due to the design of the game, they designed space units to be like a little understated, so if you can make them overstated, you can start to swing the game in your favor. We've got a distant patroller here, so not a card you see quite a bit. So when defeated, you can give a shield token to a blue unit. So they're a 2/1, meaning we can buff them with Rey, hit them with something, and then give a shield. The math for that is we've got 7 blue units that cost 2 or less. So if we play like a distant patroller round number 2 and then buff it up to a 3/2, that would cost the 3. And then we would use all our resources at that point. But that means we have about a 73% chance to find a target by the start of round 2, and then an 89% chance by the start of round 3. So pretty good math to be able to hit that. Really good kind of a thing to be able to, you know, put on something like a Follower of the Way, or even like a Clan Ren Rescuer, Guardian of the Wills, something like that. Shield them up and then be able to hit stuff and keep your units around. So pretty useful card, especially in this deck. Synergizes well with the Mandalorians. Next, we've got a Green Squadron A-Wing. So in earlier versions of this deck, I used a fair amount of raid cards, and I do think there's possible to put in a raid package, just because raid is an on-attack ability that buffs their power. So traditionally, stuff with raid has a little bit less power unless it's attacking. So in the case of Green Squadron A-Wing, it's a 1/3, but it hits for 3 because of the raid 2. But that means that you can hit them twice with Rey, turning them into a 3/5 that then hits for 5. And right, so starting out as a 2, and you do have to spend resources to be able to hit up to that, but that is actually like a ton of damage, especially yeah, being able to hit up for that much in space is just very, very good. So we've included them in the deck. The next card is a Gray Squadron Y-Wing. I don't know, I was having a little bit of trouble with that. I guess I probably couldn't say it 10 times fast, but another card from Shadows of the Galaxy that I think is just kind of like a just like that Cartel Turncoat I talked about a minute ago. I had a ton of fun buffing these up with Rey, because again, they're another one of those things that you can give 2 experience to. They become a 3/5, and their on-attack ability is that the opponent chooses a unit or base that they control, and then you deal 2 damage to it. So really, it's putting out a ton of damage, similar amount in toto to the Green Squadron A-Wing, except instead of hitting a specific thing for 5, 2 of that damage is spread out a little bit. But again, it's so cheap, it just comes out on 2. We've got a lot of kind of lower cost units because we can drop them even like in the midway point of the game and then just immediately start to buff them. And again, like a Green Squadron A-Wing with like 1 more health, it means that it survives all of your like an opponent's A-Wing, right? Especially if you're claiming and immediately doing that. So really, if you can get them out of the range of your opponent's cards, that's kind of where you want to be playing at. We've got another Outer Rim Headhunter. I did put this in the last list, Cassian and Boba Fett list. I'm really a fan of this card, especially in Twin Suns, the on-attack abilities. There was a suite of cards in Spark of Rebellion where it said, like, if you control a leader unit, then X. And Outer Rim Headhunter is the yellow aspect card, and like, because there's one for each aspect, and then they did something based on that aspect, based on if you had a leader or not. But I think they're very good in Twin Suns if you can work around them, because you've got twice the hits for your leader, right? Because you've got 2 leaders instead of 1, so they don't really care which leader it is. But the on attack of Outer Rim Headhunter is that you can exhaust a non-leader unit. So again, another way to stall Another one card that kind of contributes to that, like a Mandalorian strategy himself, where the Mandalorian himself is kind of exhausting the enemy units with 4 or less HP. This card can tap down some of the other cards once you get above that 4 or less, and then tap down some larger stuff, especially if you're trying to claim like an enticing reward later in the game. You're trying to claim that bounty and you want to tap down like a troublesome enemy unit, you can use that. Plus, they're already pretty good. They've got that raid thing like I talked about on Green Squadron A-Wing, so you can buff them up a little bit with Rey and be hitting above your weight, so they're just kind of all around pretty good. Restored Arc, just good for the heal, really. It's basically like I talked about the A-Wing, X-Wing, I guess, X-Wing, the Alliance X-Wing being the kind of like generic card. So you can see that demonstrated right here with the Restored Arc, who just has blue as the aspect, and then the only difference between them is that it's got Restore 1 because of that restriction. So similar to how the Phase 3 Dark Troopers are just like an upgraded version of Cellbot Guard, same thing here with the Restored Arc, but again, just another easy thing that you can buff up to be a 3-4, and then when you're hitting with it, it's Restore. And Restore is very good in Twin Suns, just because the way that the game works, most health, right, after the rounds and someone's getting knocked out, you want to be able to restore sometimes. So just very useful to be using there. Concord Dawn Interceptor. So one of our I guess we've got 4 Mandalorian space units. One of those, they're a Sentinel, and they also get +2/+0 while they are defending, so they can hit up quite a bit. They are useful and constructed to kind of get rid of your opponent's Green Squadron A-Wings and stick around. But also worth noting that, like, if the Dark Saber, oops, scrolled a little too far there, but the attack unit gains on attack, given experience token to each other Mandalorian unit, friendly unit. So that counts stuff even that's in space. So if you've got a Sabine on the ground hitting with the Darksaber, she will be buffing your space interceptors. So again, something keep in mind. Do not forget about that. Disabling Fang, great sideboard card and constructed, but here main deck, because it is a Mandalorian and it defeats an upgrade. So if you're playing against another Mandalorian, maybe the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan, you want to knock off a Darksaber, this is your way to do it. Or maybe there's a shielded Sentinel and you need to get that shield off. They're just a great toolbox card to be able to pull out. And again, like, nice to fetch with stuff like This Is the Way, because they are Mandalorian traded, so easy to kind of fetch with stuff like that. The next card is a card I put in my Cassian and Boba list last week, just because it is so good. Because if you are playing in a deck that has a lot of heroic aspected units, this is just a very good card. It gives each of your friendly heroic units raid 1, so sort of an Anthem effect, but Anthem effect on attack. Also, it's a 2/3 with raid 1, so you can buff it with Rey, turn it into a 3/4, but then it will hit for 4 because of the raid. So again, putting the raid on your units is kind of better than an Anthem effect in this specific build, because the raid doesn't actually add to its power, so you can still be buffing units with Rey, and then they'll be hitting up higher than they would otherwise be with raid. So actually really, really ideal for this build. We're getting up into our final high cost cards here. We've got the Razor Crest, so Restore 2. We can't buff it with Rey, but that's fine. Restore 2 is still quite nice. And 4 health is a fair amount in space. But when played, you can return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. So if you have gotten out, maybe let's say like a Jedi lightsaber on your Yoda, they kill your Yoda, and then you want to get that lightsaber back, put it on maybe your Obi-Wan, on your Kylo, something like that. Easy way to do that. So I think, especially in a deck that runs a fair amount of upgrades, this is the kind of thing you need. And if there was like more of them, I would probably pick them, just because you don't want to be 2-for-1ing yourself. The risk of a deck like this with a lot of upgrades, and why I've only even gone to 12, I debated like 15 or so, is each time you put an upgrade on a unit that then dies, you are 2-for-1ing yourself. So without a whole lot of stuff like Razor Crest, there's not a way to kind of undo that, and you really don't want to be doing like 2-for-1ing yourself quite a bit. So when we get down to upgrade, you'll see a fair amount of those are shields or ways to fetch more cards. So those types of upgrades are fine because they allow us to trade in a way that we otherwise wouldn't, and so we're not 2-for-1ing ourselves, or they replace themselves because they're like draw effects or things like that. Next thing here is the highest cost space unit is a Survivor's Gauntlet. So they have a win played ability, but it's also on attack. So pretty good there because it's got immediate board impact. You can attach an upgrade on a unit to another eligible unit, which is controlled by the same player. So you can get into a fair amount of shenanigans with bounties, moving them around, especially if your playgroup uses very many of them. You could cause them a fair amount of trouble with the Survivor's Gauntlet, but also just moving around and entrenched like onto certain things, cards like that, you can really cause quite a bit of havoc and manipulate the board into a favorable position for you. And also they've got more utility in the sense that we've got a whole lot of upgrades on here. So let's say you've already got off your attack with a hot shot blaster and it's on a unit that you know your opponent is just going to kill. Maybe it's on a sentinel because you had to use it on Obi-Wan or something like that. You can use this to move it around. Maybe you've deployed your leader and you want to stick it on the Mandalorian instead or something like that. It allows you to do a fair amount of pretty tricky things, and especially there's a card I put on the maybe board which was Evidence of the Crime. I know it's pretty small here, but it allows you to take control of an upgrade that costs 3 or less, and then you can attach it where you like, especially if you've like, and I think that there's a case to be made for this main deck. We just didn't have enough slots for it. If you're running stuff like Evidence of the Crime, even better, because then you can steal stuff and then move around the stuff that you've stolen. So that will be it for the space units. We'll cover the events here next. All right, getting started here with the events. The first one is bounty posting, which is a tutor effect, which lets us search our whole deck for a bounty upgrade. We reveal it and then draw it, and then we can play that upgrade. So that basically counts as an extra copy of every single one of our bounties which are in our deck. Now, we are not running a ton of bounties. I think there is a version of this deck that might go up in that amount, maybe up to ending up with about 15 upgrades or so, but the ones we have are very good. We've got a Public Enemy, which gives a shield token to our unit, which allows us to get resource positive trades that we might not otherwise be able to get. It also costs 0, so immediately, if we can play bounty posting, we can immediately grab that. Wanted, which lets us ready to resources, so a form of ramp. So if we want to be able to maybe immediately kind of untap some of our stuff, be able to then drop like an Outer Rim Headhunter or a Gray Squadron Y-Wing, or maybe we just want to put an experience token on our unit, drop something else. Wanted can be pretty useful there. And we've also got Enticing Reward, which I think is the best one, which is the one you will probably be trying to get most of the time, probably 99% of the time, because that lets you search the top 10 cards of your deck. 10 cards is a huge chunk. That's a fifth of our deck for 2 non-unit cards, which we can then draw, put into our hand. So we've got a fair amount of those in the deck because we're running like so many upgrades, but we've also got a handful of events. And Enticing Reward can pull out multiple cards all at once. We can scroll up here a minute. I don't remember off the top of my head, but with 15 non-units, that means we have an 87.9% chance to draw 2, which is a really good chance. This is probably the thing you'll be taking most of the time, unless you're going to be trying to do a few extra actions with Wanted or something like that. But bounty posting, very useful because it also just lets us play the upgrade, which gets us up on our actions, right? It's not just a tutor that puts it into our hand, it lets us play that upgrade right away. So stuff that costs 1, stuff that costs 0 is very good with it, because especially the stuff that costs 0, you can immediately just put it straight out. And as I mentioned at the start of our video, I know like bounties are sometimes pretty hard to use in Twin Suns because you've got 3 other opponents who can be claiming those bounties, especially like heal and stuff like that. But the Mandalorian, I think, is a very good card. I mean, like, to be able to balance that out a little bit because of his, when you play an upgrade ability, you can exhaust him to exhaust an enemy unit that has 4 or less HP. So oftentimes we can use him to then tap down the thing that would be claiming the bounty that we just played. So especially early on in the game, I think this is a little bit more relevant there, because once you get later in the game, some units have higher health, and then it's harder to do unless you damage them somehow. But especially early on in the game, being able to play your bounties, tap down the stuff that would be claiming them, and then claim them yourself is a really strong, really good play there. So the next of our 3 events, we've got This Is the Way, which lets us search the top 8 cards of our deck for up to 2 Mandalorians and or upgrades. So a little similar to Enticing Reward, in that we can pull 2 things. We're looking for Mandalorians and upgrades with this. We don't search 10, but we do search 8. And the math on this is also fairly good. With 13 Mandalorians and 10 upgrades, that gives us a 95.8% chance to be drawing 2 with the forces, or not the forces with me, but with This Is the Way. So the vast majority of the time we'll be drawing the 2, and we've got, yeah, like a fair amount of Mandalorians plus a ton of upgrades. We can pull our bounties, we can pull our dark saber for the next turn to kind of set that up. Just a lot of really great deck searching. So like I talked about at the beginning, also with some of the math in the deck, I mean, we've got like you can see here with like the bounty posting with This Is the Way, with stuff like Grief Karga, we've got a fair amount of draw, tutor, search, and big chunks of the deck, even with stuff like Enticing Reward. So even though like the math deck is a little on the low end in some aspects, we've got a ton of ways to be finding stuff throughout the deck, whether that's draw, tutor, or, you know, searching the top 10. The next thing we've got is the Force Is With Me. So this is a card which is a little bit more situational. Really great if you draw it when Rey's out, but it lets you choose a friendly unit. You give 2 experience tokens to it, and then if you control a Force unit, you can also give a shield token to the chosen unit. And if that wasn't enough, you can also then attack with the chosen unit if you want, but that is not mandatory. So you're really looking to have like a Force unit out when you do this, I think, to get the shield. Again, this helps us with the resource positive trades, helping us trade up when we otherwise wouldn't be able to, get rid of something and keep our unit around. At this point in the game, we've got around a 50% chance, just because we are not running like a ton. We've got Grogu, we've got Guardian of the Wills, we've got Yoda, but not a whole lot outside of that. I think like by the time we could drop this, the math is around 50%. So, you know, don't feel bad about resourcing this earlier, but if you do have a Force unit out, this is a really strong play, especially, and it's something to draw it nice later in the game. Like I said, when Rey is out, you can shield Rey, give her experience, things like that. So moving straight into the upgrades here, we talked about these when I talked about bounty posting, but Public Enemy, really giving a shield token to our unit. I say this a lot, at least right now, but we've got, you know, the shields help us trade up, and they help give us positive resource trades when we wouldn't otherwise be able to do that. So it lets us keep a unit and get rid of some of our opponent's units. Wanted is allows us, it's like kind of pseudo ramp. Doesn't give us like a resource permanently in our row, but does allow us to ready resources after we potentially already tapped them. So being able to untap, especially if you're like you've got 3 resources, you use Rey, her leader ability, to buff something, and then you play something on 2, and then maybe you can drop this Wanted, hit something, and then drop another 2-drop. There's lots of pretty explosive early game plays that you can do with this, but even late game, it is potentially useful to be able to untap 2, and then, you know, maybe play This Is the Way, set up your next turn. So pretty useful there. We also have like a bunch, like what I talked about, C3PO. We've got, you know, so many 2-cost things in the deck. I thought it was pretty probably pretty useful to run this, just because of the sheer amount. We can scroll down here for a second. We got 21 2-cost things, and this just lets us play one of those basically for free if we can claim that bounty. So pretty useful there. Next thing is Enticing Reward. Really, I think one of the best cards in the deck, because search 10, top 10, and then pull 2 is really, really explosive. It also only costs 1, so it is very, very good when you can pull it out. We've got so many upgrades, so many, so we got like 15 total non-units between the events and the upgrades, and being able to pull 2 of those, especially stuff like Jetpack, being able to pull, set up the dark saber, even like a armor if you've got some Mandalorians out. It's also so cheap, so sometimes you can put this straight on something, tap something down, draw a bunch of stuff, and then immediately put something on that you've like just drawn with it. So because it costs only 1, it's really useful, real easy to like I said, immediately drop it, claim it, and then play something else with it because of its cost. The next thing here is the Hotshot Blaster. So a constructed, nice card there, which is replacing Surprise Strike in some lists, especially like on the yellow, because it gives you like the permanent buff. But it has Smuggle for 3, and when you play it with Smuggle, you can attack with the unit, so it gets you up on action economy. Alternatively, you can also just pay 1 to play this, and then just put it straight on something. And with the Mandalorian as our leader, sometimes it's worth it to do that, just because then we can tap down something for 1, and then, like I said, run tap down something that would be claiming our bounties or something like that. The next card is Smuggling Compartment, so you don't see this one a lot. It attaches to a vehicle, and then on attack, it gains ready a resource. So this is fantastic with Rey, because Rey needs to use 1 resource to give experience to stuff. So when you've got a Smuggling Compartment on one of your vehicles, I think we only really have space vehicles. I don't think we've got like any ground units, at least in this version of the build. I know we go into Guerrilla Attack Pod in some budget versions, but while this is on a vehicle, it's real easy to get off Rey's ability every single turn, and also is like quite cheap because you're just paying 1 for this, and it's real easy to put that out, tap something down, and then immediately be readying your resources for the rest of the game, or at least as long as that unit stays out, and then be buffing stuff every single turn. So really nice, plus a pretty cheap resource cost card there. We've got Armed to the Teeth, great card here. This really basically reads pay 2 and then put out 4 damage on the board if your opponent cannot get rid of this, or for 4 damage a turn. This gives the 2 power bonus to the unit that is attached to, but then on attack you give another friendly unit +2 +0. It is also useful in the sense that it is smuggleable for 4, and 4 is really not bad for this effect. Paying 4 for 4 damage, especially potentially on repeat, is pretty good, but you can also just pay this again for the 2, and 2 is not a whole lot. Really a good play to play this on a space unit earlier in the game. You can put out quite a bit of damage out that way. Next thing is Entrenched. I am a huge fan of Entrenched in pretty much any build with green, just because it is so versatile. You see this in control builds and constructed. It says that the attached unit cannot attack bases, but sometimes it's worth it to attach this to your own unit. Give it +3 +3 +3 +3 for just a 2 cost is quite good, and then run it into units that you would otherwise not be able to run into. But also it is potentially a form of removal, because you can play this on an opponent's maybe like a space unit if you do not have established space, or they're hitting you there and you like have lost all your space units for whatever reason. You can like put that on a fire spray or something like that, and then they cannot be attacking you anymore, at least with that unit. So it's pretty useful, pretty versatile, as a really good upgrade both for nerfing your opponent's cards and also potentially buffing your own cards, and making them hit up when they otherwise wouldn't be able to. It's really nice to be able to play it on stuff like Kanan Jarrus. He can hit up for 7 and he can kill like a Boba leader. So there's a lot of pretty tricky things you can do there. Next card is a jetpack. So continuing with the shield sub-theme, this attaches to a non-vehicle, and then you give a shield token to that unit, but then you have to defeat it at the end of the regroup phase. So this is really useful for just temporary buff to hit something, kill it that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. It also provides a power bonus, so it lets you again hit up. So it lets you hit up and you get a shield, so you're using this to trade for units that you couldn't otherwise do again and keep your units around. Really great kind of attrition card there. And if that wasn't enough, it does have smuggle on 4, so you don't have to feel bad about resourcing it early, because playing it again for 4 later, just like Armed to the Teeth, is a fine play. Next card we've got here is the Mandalorian armor. So it gives +1, +3, but if it's attached to a Mandalorian, you can give a shield token to it. So again, we're going through tons of things that give us shields so we can hit stuff, keep our units around. This is just another way to do that. But again, this just costs 2, so it's not that hard to drop this the second round, but maybe buff something before you do that. Turn it into, for instance, maybe we immediately played a Clan Ren Rescuer, or maybe we played a Follower of the Way. We can use Rey's ability at the start of round 2 to buff either of them, and then they turn, like in the case of Follower of the Way, they turn into a 3/5, and then you could put the armor on them and then buff them even more, plus give them the shield. So pretty useful there. It turns your cards though into kind of like must answer cards, so you do have to kind of play around that a little bit. You don't want to put a gigantic target on your back, but you can get some pretty explosive plays with that armor. Next thing here is the Jedi lightsaber. So again, non-vehicle units, you cannot attach a lightsaber to a vehicle, but while the attached unit is a force unit, on attack, the defender gets -2/-2. So this can kill the unit, again, if it drops it to 0 health in response to this trigger, this going on the stack, this action. But it also gives the unit +3/+3. So if you stick this on something, I played a bit of Han 2 Blue really early on in the Shadows of the Galaxy. I played like a kind of like all force Han Blue. I was testing that out months back, but you know, putting those Jedi lightsabers onto Rey, turning her into like a 7/10 that then healed damage each time she attacks, turns her into like quite a force to be reckoned with. So if you can stick this on any of these force units, we've got quite a bit. We've got Kylo, we've got Obi-Wan, we walked through all of them when we did the ground units, but if you can stick it on there, plus our leader, one of our 2 leaders, Rey herself, is a force unit, so again, great play to put it on her. Next thing is the Mandalorian's rifle. So that, again, non-vehicles, because a vehicle cannot use his rifle. But when played, if the attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader. So really kind of like unconditional capture. This is basically kind of functional removal, although captured cards do go under, so they can be rescued, people can get them back, but you know, sometimes by the time you've stolen them, and if you can keep them for a little bit, sometimes it's functionally permanent removal. So this doesn't just count our Mandalorian leader though. We're running the legendary Mandalorian unit, so this also works on the Mandalorian unit. So you just need to have the named character card, so you can see he's a named character as the Mandalorian unique unit, so it also works on him. So worth noting, you don't just have to have deployed your leader to use that card, you can also use it on the Mandalorian legendary unit, so we've got multiple hits for that. And then we've got the Darksaber. So this attaches, again, we've got to non-vehicle unit, but it gives the unit that it's attached to +4/+3. While you play it on a Mandalorian unit, you can ignore its aspect penalty. So that is the whole reason it's in here, because we've got a ton of Mandalorians, and so we don't really care that it's green. It does not come out on 6 if we are playing it on a Mandalorian. And then it gains on attack, give an experience token to each other friendly Mandalorian. So it basically acts as an anthem effect. except even if they get rid of it, it's kind of like a almost permanent anthem as long as the unit stays around, because it's giving experience tokens to stuff. So if you can stick this on there, especially with Rey, starting out with, you know, the few like small experience on there at the beginning, and then stick the Darksaber on there, and then start buffing them up even more, the Mandalorians start to snowball quite a bit. We've got a number of them. We can scroll back up here to get the number. We've got a 73% chance to draw a Mandalorian unit just straight from our deck, and that's just counting normal draws, not extra draw effects from plan or anything like that. But that is a fair chance to hit the Darksaber but immediately, like at the start of round 3, and then drop it on something like a Sabine unit, and then start to kind of snowball from there. But it's also fine kind of like at any point in the game, because just because it's so powerful. And even playing this on 6 to give +4/+3 to some other unit is actually not a horrible thing to be doing either. Like maybe you're kind of like later in the game, you got your Obi-Wan out, you turn him into like an 8/9. Sometimes that is fine to do too. If you've got nothing else to do, even playing it on 6, it can be pretty good. So that wraps up the 110 version build of the deck. I will go into the subsequent versions here. We've got a $50, $25, and then 10. So we'll go right into those here in a second. Alright, for the $50 version here, we are just making 2 changes. So Luke Skywalker is a pretty pricey legendary unit, used quite a bit as playsets in constructed decks like Han 2 Blue. So we are easy switch here. We can switch him for Mace Windu, who is also a legendary but doesn't see as much play currently. Sometimes as a one of, or it just depends, kind of like some off meta builds, but not nearly as expensive as Luke. So we are switching them out there. But Mace himself, I mean, is pretty good, and I think you can draw him with Queel because he's red, so he matches the Catacombs base color. So really, I think there's a case to be made for playing Mace Windu anyway. His ability is also very good. He comes out with Ambush, and then when he attacks and defeats a unit, you can ready him. So he can really kind of, especially with the tokens, which will be coming up with Twilight of the Galaxy, he can like murder a ton of droid tokens if he sticks around, immediately kill stuff, and then ready himself. And I think is honestly not a very big power trade-off. That is not the case so much for the next card. The Darksaber is our other big kind of high cost individual card, so we can't really keep that around into our more budget friendly versions of the deck. Although I think this is a fair power trade-off just because we've got so many Mandalorians in the deck. But again, we can't keep that if we are trying to go for a budget version. So we want to keep the same amount of upgrades. So we've switched it out. There's a few that you could switch it out with. Honestly, I think you could go with the bounty that lets you draw cards. You could go with the grapple shot if you're just trying to make some kind of cheaper upgrades. There's a few different things. I just settled on the Vambrace flamethrower because it keeps our resource curve pretty similar, and the on attack ability, it lets us deal 3 damage divided as we want among enemy ground units, is pretty useful because you can attack one player and then put all the damage across other players like however you want. So if there's just like 1 damage left on a lot of units, which sometimes there is because people are trying to make positive trades, you can kind of clear everything out with it. So I settled on this, and also it's another draw for Queel, so kind of like upping those red units. So that is the $50 version. We will go into the $20 version here. Alright, on this $25 version, we start to see some pretty big changes to the main deck version of the deck. Pretty similar to kind of how with like Boba and Cassian, we had to kind of switch out of one of our kind of main archetypes and then go into kind of an ambush sub-theme with Enfys Nest. Here we have to drop our force package because we had Windu, who is not cheap himself, although quite a bit cheaper than Luke. We had Kylo Ren, who was a legendary unit, and again, not really expensive, but I mean $5 or $6. around there. And then Rey keeping the past, again, maybe like $10. So we can't keep all of these things around. Even Jedi Lightsaber, I think, is like around $3. So especially if we're going to go down to $10, we have to drop our Force package. So we've got to drop all of those legendary Force units. And also, we've got to get rid of the Forces with Me just because we don't have Force units. The Forces with Me is considerably less good without a bunch of main deck ones. Even though we have Rey, I just didn't think it was as consistent. So we switched that with Fell the Dragon just to give us some main deck removal. And Fell the Dragon is a great card by itself anyway. So we've just kind of switched them for like on curve good cards, like kind of good stuff from there. Mace Windu, we have switched kind of to our go-to and cunning heroism budget option cards, which is Han Solo, pretty cheap because he came in the first round of starter decks. But if he didn't, I think he would be a little bit more pricey than he is. He's a very good card. He's a 6/6 with ambush, and while attacking, he deals combat damage first. So he often trades for units that like, yeah, and then again, fitting our deck theme of getting like positive resource trades, he sticks around, and if they can't get rid of him, he can often like immediately kill multiple units, so that he kind of demands an answer. And he also has immediate board impact. From there, we switched out of Kylo on 6, so we went with Finn Rao, who's a Mandalorian, and Finn Rao lets us play an upgrade from our hand for a little bit less, so fitting our deck sub-theme, a fitting card for the deck. And then when we play an upgrade on Finn Rao, we can give an enemy unit -2/-2, so this is really good for getting rid of pesky 7th fleets, maybe lurking TIE Phantoms even, and is a fine card to be playing no matter what. I mean, if you're in a Mandalorian upgrade themed deck. So I don't think a really great power trade-off with, it's not like Kylo has ambush or anything particularly. And then after that, from Rey, we went to Chewbacca, Loyal Companion. Again, I was looking for stuff that had immediate impact. Rey, Kylo, some of those other cards really don't. Like, they don't have Sentinel, they don't have ambush. Chewbacca has Sentinel, so he can come out and immediately kind of tie up the ground. And when he's attacked, you can ready him so he can immediately start attacking stuff if people start running things into him. So pretty useful there, I think. And then we had to switch off of the Jedi Lightsaber because, again, we're going down quite a bit on our Force units, and to get under our amount, we switched that Lightsaber, though, with an Electro Staff. So I talked a second ago about Chewie. The Electro Staff has a special ability that, like, while the attached unit is defending, the attacker gets -1/-0, so that is kind of why this is in here too for our Sentinel units, because like Obi-Wan, Chewie, if they've got an Electro Staff, it puts the power down like on a lot of units, and especially if they're trying to run like multiple, it makes them have to run multiple units into your Sentinels to get rid of them. But it's also fine anyway because it gives +2/+2, which is a fair power bonus. And even if you put this on a more aggressive card, if people are trying to get rid of that card, it makes it so it's quite a bit harder, at least to run units into it, although they're still vulnerable to like event removal and things like that. I mentioned already, but we can go over Fell the Dragon. Fell the Dragon is just a 4 cost, same as the Forces with Me, but it lets you defeat a non-leader unit with 5 or more power. So things like Han Solo, things like the Mandalorian, or like Fett's Fire Spray, other pesky kind of like 5 and 6 drop cards. Just really useful kind of generic removal, but there's other stuff that you could switch in here too and kind of tailor it to your meta. So now we'll go into the $10 version. Alright, in the $10 version, we are switching the Hotshot Blaster for Resilient. So there's an argument to be made here for switching to Surprise Strike, just to get, fill a similar deck role. But Hotshot Blaster isn't just, for the damage. It is also because it's an upgrade, and we're kind of like looking for upgrades with a lot of our cards. So I went with Resilient. It gives 3 more health for just 1, so very cheap to give a health benefit. to stuff, again, kind of similar in role to what we see with the shields in the deck, and I did not want to go down on upgrades and go up on events. It would kind of mess with our deck math a little bit, so we went with Resilient. The next thing here is we had to trade the Mandalorian legendary unit. He, again, is not really expensive. Like a lot of Shadows of the Galaxy legendaries are not nearly as expensive as their Spark of Rebellion counterparts, but even like $5, if we're trying to go down to 10, we can't really have them because it's more than half of our deck cost. So we had to drop him and go with the Gorilla Attack Pod here. So Gorilla Attack Pod, again, is a pretty fine card. It's got can have immediate board impact. Those are the kind of things we're looking for, especially with these power trade kind of switch offs. When played, if a base has 15 or more damage on it, you can ready it. Plus, it has grit, so if it gets damaged, it starts to do more. It's also a vehicle, so you can put things like smuggling compartment on it if you would like to do that. The last card that we had to switch out was Red 3. I try to keep Red 3 in the deck as long as possible because Red 3 gives all of our heroism cards a power buff on attack, which is just very good anthem effect in our deck. But again is about $5 or so we can't leave that in here. We had to switch it out with, like, I chose the Freighter just because it is something you can buff with Rey, turn it into a 3/6, and a 3/6 space unit is fine, and there's not really another like 3-cost unit that you can kind of trade out for this and still keep the curve. That would be workable, although I guess you could maybe try a rickety quad jumper or something like that potentially. But I went with the Freighter just because I was trying to keep it on curve, and it's something you can buff with Rey. But there's other things you could put here, even if you wanted to go up a resource or two, play some bigger space units, just because this card is just, you know, kind of filler. You know, I could see you doing that too, or, you know, replacing it with a valuable kind of upgrade that lets you draw like Deathmark or something like that. But that is it for the budget-friendly builds. Alright, that wraps up the video for today. So if you like this kind of content, it really helps me out. If you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more like it. I do post a fair amount of these sorts of builds. I try and do one every month or two. I also post a lot of Carabas gameplay videos, so follow along if you want to see more budget Twin Suns builds. I hope this has helped you. If you you know, just want to get started really easily, the $10 version could probably be built for completely free, just using extras at an LGS or like at a local play group with people who are, you know, friendly and will let you use cards that are worth less than $1 and just kind of take them and use them as you want. Because yeah, the $10 version, all the cards are kind of just worth cents, and it wouldn't be hard to just throw that together, be able to go to a game. And I really think it's pretty powerful. It can kind of punch above its weight due to all of the synergies in the list. So I hope you have a good day. I will see you later.